Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I want to welcome in Cindy and thank you for being here. And Teresa, I hope you're still here with us. Thank you for all those that are going to be watching a replay. Thank you for coming in and watching. And I hope more of y'all come on. Let's get started. We are back once again with the harmonies of the Gospels. We're going to go to Matthew. It's going to be let me get this up here so I can have the list in front of me. That where Jesus heals the man with a withered hand. Now let's get in here and see what the Lord has to say to us. Now, going from that place, he went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." And he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out plotting how they might kill Jesus. Hi, Teresa. I'm glad you're here with us. Now let's see what we have. 12:9. Okay. And it gives us for more information, which we will be going there. So we'll see what else. At the point, okay, as they pointed to the man with a shriveled hand, the Pharisees tried to trick Jesus by asking him if it was legal to heal on the Sabbath. Their Sabbath rules said that people could not be helped on the Sabbath, only if their lives were in danger. Jesus healed on the Sabbath several times, and none of those healings were a response to emergencies. If Jesus had waited until another day, he would have been submitting to the Pharisees' authority, showing that their petty rules were equal to God's law. If he healed the man on the Sabbath, the Pharisees could claim that because Jesus broke the rules, his power was not of God. But Jesus made it clear how ridiculous and petty their rules were. God is a God of people, not rules. The best time to reach out to someone is when he or she needs help. Okay, verses 10 through 12. The Pharisees placed their laws above human need. They were so concerned about Jesus breaking one of their rules that they did not care about the man's shriveled hand. Excuse me. What is your attitude towards others? If your if your convictions do not allow you to help certain people, your convictions may not be in tune with God's word. Don't allow dogma to blind you to human need. Excuse me. Okay, verse 14. Now the Pharisees plotted Jesus' death because they were outraged. Jesus had overruled their authority and had exposed their evil attitudes in front of the entire crowd in the synagogue. Jesus had shown that the Pharisees were more loyal to their religious systems than to God. All right, let's go in now and see what Mark 3, 3, 6, 1, 3, 1 through 6. At another time he went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up here in front of everybody." Then Jesus said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or do evil, to save your life or to kill?" They remained silent. And he looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodes how they might kill Jesus. Okay, let's go back here. 3, 1. Okay. Already the Pharisees had turned against Jesus. They were jealous of his popularity, his miracles, and the authority in his teachings and actions. They valued their status in the community and their opportunity for personal gain so much that they lost sight of their goal as religious leaders to point people towards God. Of all people, the Pharisees should have recognized the Messiah, but they refused to acknowledge him because they were not willing to give up their treasured positions and power. When Jesus exposed their attitudes, he became their enemy instead of their Messiah, and they began to look for ways to turn the people against him. Let me turn people against him. And began looking for ways to turn the people against him in harmful ways. In contrast, Jesus expressed his anger by correcting the problem, healing the man's hand. Your anger can find constructive solutions rather than tear people down. In verse 6, the Pharisees were a Jewish religious group that zealously followed the Old Testament laws, as well as their own religious traditions. They were highly respected in the community, but they hated Jesus because he challenged their proud attitudes and dishonorable motions. The Herodians were a Jewish political party that hoped to restore Herod the Great's line to the throne. Jesus was a threat to them as well because he challenged their political ambitions. The Pharisees and Herodes, normally enemies, joined forces against Jesus because he exposed them for what they were. The Pharisees accused Jesus of breaking their law that said medical attention should not be given on the Sabbath, except in matters of life or death. Ironically, the Pharisees themselves were breaking God's law by plotting murder. You notice in the different scriptures, the difference between Matthew and Mark in this is how Jesus in here in Mark had the man come and stand up in front of everyone, where it is not that is not stated in Matthew. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. It's going to be interesting to see what Luke has to say. So let's go there. Luke 6:6. Luke 6, chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Chapter 6 through 11. Now on another Sabbath he went into the synagogue and was teaching. And a man who was there whose right hand was shriveled. Now I'm going to start right there. This is the first place that is stating that he was teaching, that he had went into the synagogue and was teaching. And a man was there, right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking. Again, first time hearing this, as far as within this event, that Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up, stand up in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to destroy it?" He looked around at them and then said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was completely restored. But they were furious and began to discuss with one another ways they might do things, one another what they might do to Jesus. Again, we will go in here in the notes and see what they have to say. According to the tradition of religious leaders, no healing could be done on the Sabbath. Healing, they argued, was practicing medicine, and a person could not practice his or her profession on the Sabbath. It was more important for the religious leaders to protect their laws than to free a person from pain and suffering. Jesus' enemies were furious. Not only had he read their minds, he also flaunted their laws and exposed their hatred in their hearts. It is ironic that their hatred combined with their zeal for the law that drove them to plot murder at an act that was clearly against the law. So that's very interesting. The differences we're seeing in the different, same event, different tellings of it in three of these gospels. So now let's go down to go back to Matthew and then about. Let me see where we're at. Large crowds are following Jesus. We're going to go back into Matthew 12, 5 through 21. Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Okay, let me see if I'm reading this correctly because. No, that can't be right. Matthew 15 through 21. Okay. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, I can't even read my own handwriting. I had to look it twice. So let's start at 15. Again, it's 12th chapter of Matthew, verse 15. Aware of this, Jesus withdrew from that place, and many followed him, and he healed all their sick, warning them not to tell who he was. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, the one I love, whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smothering wick he will not snuff out, until he leads justice to victory. In his name the nations will put their hope. Okay, let's go into Mark 3, chapter 3, 1 through 6. At another time he went into the synagogue, and a man, we already went through that one. Where are we at? 37 through 12. There we go. That makes more sense. There we go. Now Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard all he was doing, many people came to him from Jerusalem, Judea, Idum, and the regions across the Jordan around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him. He kept the people from crowding him, for he had healed many, so that their diseases were pushing towards him to touch him. Whatever the evil spirits saw, they fell down with him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell who he was. Okay, let's go into my writing down stuff. Seems to be a little off today for some reason. Okay, let's go in to where Jesus selects his 12. This is going to be found in Mark and Luke. So let's go to Mark chapter 3, verses 18. So 18 or 13? That's 13 through 19. Okay. Jesus went to the mountainside and caught all those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designating them apostles, that they may be with him and that he may send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These were the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he also gave the name Peter; James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, which is sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Then we're going into Luke 6. 6:12 through 16. 12, 12 through 16. That can't be right. 6, 6. See if I can get to the right chapter. It would help. There's 6, 12 through 16. Okay. One of these days, Jesus went out to the mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When the morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he had designated apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called Zealot, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became the traitor. Okay. Now I found that I have not read any of the writing, so I will go ahead, any of the notes here. So I will go ahead and do that now with this passage, with these passages here. Let me see. What's on the other side? Nope. Okay. According to the traditions of religious leaders, no healing. Yeah. 12. Okay. The gospel writers noted that every important event in Jesus' life he took time to go off by himself to pray. This time Jesus was preparing to choose his inner circle, the 12 disciples, and make sure that all your important decisions are grounded in prayer. 13. Nope. Yep, 13. Jesus had many disciples, learners, but he chose only 12 apostles, messengers. The apostles were his inner circle, who he gave special training and to whom he sent out with his own authority. These were the men who started the Christian church in the Gospels. These 12 men are actually called disciples, but in the books of Acts, they are called apostles. Jesus selected ordinary men with a mixture of backgrounds and personalities to be his disciples. Today, God chooses ordinary people together to build the church, teach salvation message, and serve others out of love. Alone, we can feel unqualified to serve Christ effectively, but together we can make up a group strong enough to serve God in any way. Ask for patience to accept the diversity of people in your church and build on that variety of strengths represented in your group. All right, let's go to Jesus is giving the Beatitudes. Matthew 5. Let's go there first. Matthew 5. Matthew 5, 1 through 12. Now he saw the crowd and went up to the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, Blessed is the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the mournful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are all the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because greater is the reward in heaven for you. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were born before you. Okay. And we're going to go to Luke 6. You see Luke 6, 17. 6, 6. He went down with them and stood in a level place. A large crowd of his disciples were there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. They, these troubled by evil spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. He looked at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you who men hate you when when they exclude you and insult you for the reject of your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven, for this is their fathers treated the prophets." Let me see. 26. Okay. "But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you who all men speak well of you, for that is how their fathers treated the false prophets." Now let's go back here and look for my notes where they're starting at. 17. Excuse me. Now, let me get me something to drink right quick. Once the word of Jesus' healed power spread through the crowds gathered just to touch him. For many, he had become a symbol of good fortune, a lucky charm, or a magician. Instead of desiring God's pardon and love, they only wanted physical healing or a chance to see spectacular events. Some people still see God as a cosmic magician and consider prayer as a way to get God to do his tricks. But God is not a magician, he is the master. Prayer is not a way for us to control God, it's a way for us to be put ourselves under his control. This may be Luke's account of the sermon that Matthew read according to 5 or 7, or it may be Jesus gave a similar sermon on different occasions. Some believe that this was not one sermon but a composition based on Jesus' customary teachings. These verses are called the Beatitudes, from that Latin word meaning blessing. They will describe what it means to be Christ's followers. They are standard of conduct that contrast kingdom values with worldly values, showing what Christ followers can expect from the world and what God will give them. They contrast fake piety with true humility. And finally, they show how the Old Testament expectations are fulfilled in God's kingdom. Some believe that the hunger on which Jesus spoke about was a hunger for righteousness. Others say this is a physical hunger. In any case, in a nation where riches are seen a sign of God's favor, Jesus startled his hearers by pronouncing blessing on the hungry. In doing so, however, he was in line with the ancient tradition of the Old Testament, was fulfilled the text proclaiming God's concern for the poor and needy. If you are trying to find fulfillment only through riches, wealth may be the only reward you will ever get. It does not last. You should not seek comfort now as it at the expense of eternal life. Let me see. Okay. There have been many false prophets in the Old Testament. They were praised by kings and crowds because of their predictions. Prosperity and victory in war were exactly what the people wanted to hear. But popularity was not guaranteed of the truth, and people flattery does not bring God's approval. Sadness lies ahead for those who chase after the crowd's praise rather than God's truth. And we're going to read about Jesus teaching about salt and light, and that is in Matthew 5. Matthew 5. 13 through 16. You are salt of the earth. If the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does a people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and give light for everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works, your good deeds, and praise your Father in heaven. And we're going to go right down here and see. For a season there was no flavor. It was no value if Christians make no effort to affect the world around them. There is little value to God. If we are too much like the world, we are worthless. Christians should not blend in with everyone else. Instead, we should affect others positively, just as seasoning brings out the best flavor in food. Can you hide a city that is setting up on top of a hill? Its light at night can be seen for miles. If we live for Christ, we will grow like lights, showing others what Christ is like. We hide our lights by being quiet when we should speak, going along with the crowd, denying the light, letting sin dim our light, not explaining our light to others, or ignoring the needs of others. Be a beacon of truth. Do not shut your life off from the rest of the world. And there we go. We go into, let me see, our last teaching is about where Jesus teaches about the law. Let me get in here in Matthew 5:17. Okay. Do not think that I come to abolish the law or the prophets. I do not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter or the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished. Everyone who breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. All right, let's read what our notes have to say here for this. God's moral and ceremonial laws were given to help people love God with all their hearts and minds. All throughout Israel's history, however, these laws had been often misquoted or misapplied. By Jesus' time, religious leaders had turned the laws into confusing mass of rules. When Jesus talked about the new way of understanding God's law, he was actually trying to bring people back to its original purpose. He did not speak against the law itself, but against the abuse and excess in which it had been subjected. If Jesus had not come to abolish the law, does that mean the Old Testament law still applies to us today? In the Old Testament, there were three categories of law: ceremonial, civil, and moral. The ceremonial law related specifically to Israel worship. Let's see. Its primary purpose was to point forward to Jesus Christ. These laws, therefore, were no longer necessary after Jesus' death and resurrection. While we no longer are bound by ceremonial law, the principles behind them to worship and be loved a holy God still apply. Jesus often accused by the Pharisees of violating ceremonial law. The civil law applied to daily living in Israel because modern society and cultures are so radically different from that time and setting. All of these guidelines cannot be followed specifically, but the principles behind the commands are timeless and should guide our conduct. Jesus demonstrated these principles by example. Moral law, such as the Ten Commandments, is the direct command of God and it requires strict obedience. The moral law reveals the nature will of God and still applies today. Jesus obeyed the moral law completely. Some of those in the crowd were experts at telling others what to do, and they missed the central point of God's law themselves. Jesus made it clear, however, that by obeying God's law is more important than explaining it. It was much easier to study God's law and telling others to obey them than put them into practice. How how are you doing at obeying God yourself? The Pharisees were exacting and scrupulous in their attempt to follow their laws. So how could Jesus reasonably call us a greater righteousness than theirs? The Pharisees' weakness was that they were content to obey the laws outwardly without allowing God to change their hearts or attitudes. Jesus was saying, therefore, that the quality of your goodness will be greater than that of the Pharisees. They looked they looked pious, but they were far from the kingdom of God. God judges our hearts as well as our deeds, for it is in the heart that our real allegiance lies. Be just as concerned about your attitudes that people do not see and about your actions that are seen by all. Jesus said this to his listeners and did a different kind of righteousness altogether, love and obedience, not just a more intense version of the Pharisees' righteousness, legal competence, nor righteousness must come from what God does in us, not what we can do by ourselves. Be Christ-centered, not self-centered. Be based on reverence to God, not approval from people. And 4, go beyond keeping the law by living by the principles of the law. And that is our reading for this week. I want to thank each and every one of you that came in today for our study, and I want to just thank those who may be up in the balcony listening. And for all those who will be watching and listening in the replay, I thank you and I appreciate y'all. I will see y'all again next week. Bye now.